I took this program from the internet again, and I received the real program today. So there is one change to the program to start with. The first presentation will be given not only by Frank Ollington, but he will share the presentation with Paul Merrigan. Then the second presentation is the same, Kathleen Brewer, and the third is by Joanne Miner. And then we have an addition to the program. I was just informed that Marise Schoneveld van der Linde, she will give a very, very brief introduction and announce the latest extension to the IPA Pompe Connection series. So this will be just a very short 2 or 3 minutes. And then we will start with Dr. Frank Ollington, and I will read some from his biography. So in 1981, Dr. Ollington received his PhD degree in biology from Harvard University. Currently, Dr. Ollington is Senior Vice President for Program Management at Genzyme, and in this role he had overall responsibility for management of the Pompe program, so not the least of a task. My personal opinion about Dr. Ollington, I don't know whether you want to hear it, but I had the impression all people at Genzyme were really working very, very hard to get things done. But when Dr. Ollington came in, things got rolling. I also introduce now Dr. Paul Merrigan, because they will share the presentation. Paul Merrigan also works for Genzyme. He is there responsible for the worldwide launch and commercialization of Myozyme. And during his 11 years at Genzyme, Paul has held several positions within Genzyme, including initiation Genzyme's registry programs, leading the global marketing efforts for Serozyme and strategic development of new therapies. He received his PhD in chemistry from Trinity College in Hartford and his MBA from Boston University. So now I'll hand over the microphone to Dr. Ollington, and we try to switch the presentation on the screen.
So first and foremost, I'd like to thank the AMDA and the IPA and the board for inviting me to speak and for inviting all of our Genzyme colleagues to be here, and particularly those that are going to give presentations. I'd like to thank Randall and Marilyn for that wonderful hospitality that they extended to all of us last night. I thought it was fantastic. When I started working on this program 4 years ago, I had the impression that occasionally Randall would like to see some of us sleeping with the fishes. It's just an amazing journey, and it's really gratifying to see how far we've come that we actually get to the point of eating with the fishes. It was really great. So it's particularly, I'm going to take just 4 or 5 minutes here because where I am engaged in the Pompe program, over the last 6 months, once we've passed through the approval stage, my responsibilities at Genzyme shift a little bit, and so I'm not as close to the program as I once was, and I'd rather have people who are close to the program and deeply involved in it have the time to describe the ongoing activities. But it wasn't always that case. It was exactly 4 years ago that I became involved with this program. I said I was going to take the risk of trying to do this so I could walk and talk at the same time, but it's not going to work. So I joined this program, became directly involved with the program almost exactly 4 years ago when the person whose name shall not be mentioned left Genzyme And I had the opportunity to come in and take a role in managing the program. And what I'm going to do here is for a few moments, is take a page from Arnold's book and really just make this, for a couple of minutes, a personal reflection as much as a corporate reflection of what this program has meant and what I've experienced being engaged in this for the last 4 years. And really, the concepts that I've put up on this slide, it was extremely gratifying to sit through the presentations this morning, excellent presentations, and to see that these concepts they're universal. They just resonated through each of the 3 presentations that I gave this morning. And actually, I don't need to spend much time on it with this audience. You understand the nature of Pompe disease in terms of its urgency and its urgent call to action, in terms of the complexity of how this disease presents and develops over time. And certainly it's evidence in the room, and it's evidence by membership even in the IPA, of the global nature of this disease. From a program perspective, of course, we saw the urgency, again, manifest itself in some peculiar ways. 4 years ago was the time when patients and their families were taking extraordinary steps. That was the time when some patient families chained themselves to the gates of the Ministry of Health. It was a time when we had presidents and senators and ministers calling our chief executive to demand access to this drug that was in development. You've heard about some of the other complexity as well from a product development perspective in terms of trying to design clinical studies and do those in a way that could, in a reasonable time, bring a product to approval. And you've heard the panorama of stories about trying to select the right drug and the most appropriate drug. So I won't dwell on those anymore, other than to say the journey through that development program and across those 4 years. Again, this is something that I think every speaker has mentioned, and the good news is it shouldn't be surprising, and I hope it's reassuring, that a corporation, the company, our company, feels the same way. That this effort has been patient-focused, it is patient-centered, it is patient-driven, and all of us feel extremely, extremely happy and enriched to be part of that collective effort. I think what I've experienced, certainly as someone naive to the program 4 years ago, is that this is a strong and robust community that is expanding and even stronger than it's ever been. So we are proud to be associated with the Pompe program and bringing this first therapy to market, to patients. Giving a corporate perspective and not mentioning 1 or 2 other items, I think, would be a little remiss. So I think when we think about this from a corporate perspective, we also look on it in terms of finance and the kind of economic investment that's been made in this program. And as we've said, I think we've disclosed this last year, that through the year 2005, Genzyme had invested about $500 million or so in this development program. And I can assure you that through the years 2006 and 2007 and 2008 and on, it will be hundreds of millions more investment to continue the development, continue the scale-up, continue the launch, and continue to do the research that's needed to improve on this therapy. Whether or not that turns out to be a wise economic investment, we don't know, and we won't know. We won't know for many years. But as one of our famous football coaches in New England would say, it is what it is. It is what, good decisions, bad decisions, multiple decisions, it is the best that we could do to fund what needed to be done to get us to this point today. And it needs to continue. One other concept from a corporate perspective, from Genzyme perspective, is impact. We've been privileged in this company to work on products that have made an incredible impact on patients' lives, and certainly in the LSD space. From Cerezyme, or Ceridase in 1991 and Cerezyme in 94, right up through this program, people really are privileged in Genzyme and absolutely appreciate the opportunity to make impact on patients' lives. and impact on the natural history of disease. When you think of Pompe disease from the start of time up until May of this year, certainly in the United States, this disease had a natural progression. Well, as of May of this year, that's changed, and that's an incredible, incredible testament to everyone in this community. Certainly not just to Genzyme, but to everyone in this Pompe community that's helped to make this happen. You see this impact be meaningful in Genzyme in that we talk about it, we actually put it out there as part of our identity, and you see it in our annual report of last year. And this being our 25th anniversary, we also use this logo that I think just arose this year of being inspired, well, it had to be just this year, being inspired by patients for 25 years. And again, I can assure you that there's been no program more than the Pompe program that absolutely has inspired people in Genzyme to work hard and to contribute to the development of this program. And that really reduces itself to very, very personal levels for many people. And I wanted to share just one story here. This is an email that I received and a few other folks received, I think it was Friday in May, early May. And this is about a week or 8 days after the approval in the United States. And this is an email from the manager of the manufacturing facility where we fill the product and then do the labeling of the finished vials, and then we do the packaging. And he's telling a story here to a few of us of an employee that works with him for 12 years. And this lady is ill, and she's going through chemotherapy, and it really was not working very well. And nevertheless, on that morning, she wasn't scheduled to be at work, but she was. And she was there at 6 a.m. To contribute to the packaging and distribution of this product on this day. And I think, when he challenged her as to why she was doing that, her response of being inspired by a young girl, a patient who had visited the plant a couple of years earlier, was really, I thought, quite incredible. And when I read this, I went through a whole series of emotions, a range of emotions. Number one, I think first and foremost was very humbling. I think, to realize that someone, could work with this kind of passion and with this kind of just purity of motivation, and just wasn't looking to be acknowledged, certainly wasn't looking to be acknowledged, but inspired by working and knowing patients that they were trying to support. Obviously, I also felt a little sad because I know this person. But then, I can't deny it, I also felt some pride. I really felt proud to be part of an enterprise that can generate the kind of opportunity to participate in something like this in one's career. It doesn't come along very often, and I think we are extremely, again, honored and privileged to participate and to be working with people who can feel this kind of passion for getting things done to support patients. And then I suppose finally what I think about, or what I take from that kind of message of this one individual, is that I really take an enormous feeling of hope for the Pompe community, because this person is not just a Genzyme employee. This person is now part of the community. And if you think of where this community has come, some of you have been part of it, and you've known every key player in this Pompe community, some of you, for the last 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. But now it's different. Now there are dozens and hundreds and probably thousands of people that you'll never know that are just inspired and motivated by being part of the Pompe community to make things better. And I think as part of that community, there is no doubt, with people like this, we will achieve a lot more. And I think everyone this morning has acknowledged we have to achieve a lot more. It's not an option. We are not satisfied with where we are in understanding the disease, understanding the variability to therapy, and in making better therapies. So we are certainly not satisfied with where we are. We want to do better, and we need to do better. And so with that, I would just like to close my comments and pass it on to the folks at Genzyme who actually are still working diligently on the program. Paul Merrigan is going to give the second part of this presentation, and then over the course of this afternoon and tomorrow, the rest of my colleagues will make some remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reuser. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, IPA and the AMDA. If Frank was responsible for getting Myozyme on the market, I'm responsible for getting people on Myozyme. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here today to address you. I'm fairly new to this program, about a year now, and I think that's good because we need some new energy because we've got a lot ahead of us to do. And I've got a great team now responsible for the launch worldwide. So what I'd like to do is share that with you and what we're working on and what we're doing. We have come a long way, though. It's been a long time coming for many of you, a long time waiting for hope for a different future. And some not here with us today, it wasn't soon enough. And we reflect on that deeply. What has been achieved is much more about the people and not much about the product, since none of this could be accomplished if it weren't for many of you here in the room today. Many courageous people who came together to overcome incredible odds, who were brave enough to make a difference. So I'd like to start by thanking all of you for your commitment, your persistence, your courage to take the risks of enrolling in clinical trials, for your help and for your understanding along the way, along this long journey. This meeting is a testament to what it takes to get treatment approved for a rare disease and a model partnership between those affected with Pompe, the medical community, and industry. We are far from being done, as you know, but now we have a new call to action, one that's turned from urgency for treatment, but now an urgency to treat. It comes with new challenges, but we're here to face them. We can do it together, and no doubt we'll overcome them. But we still have many questions. Together we'll answer those as well. We still have a long way to go. In my talk, I just want to share with you what we're working on now, where the program's at, and what we still need to do. So first of all, I find it amazing how we've decided to migrate, butterflies migrate, right? To migrate to this particular piece. Maybe because Helen's not here today, and I know she would love to be here, but it is entitled Myozyme Release. And if she was here, she'd say the butterfly spends the great part of its life in a cocoon, then escapes and flies, off to start a new life. The different types of colors of butterflies represent our people, our Pompe people from around the world. The liftoff signifies the hope and freedom of life. I really don't think it could be said any a better way. We've given hope not only just for Pompe, but for many other neurological diseases, many other neuromuscular diseases, and other rare diseases. And now we're in that point. This is our art. We're very proud of what we've been able to contribute in our state-of-the-art manufacturing. Anybody who comes to Boston or Cambridge would welcome you to see how we make this product. Over to the left, your left, over to the left was our first generation of a small bioreactors, which we've scaled up to the larger bioreactors here. This is a two-story facility. This is one story here, and then this is from the bottom looking up, and this tank goes up through the ceiling here. This is our 2,000-liter material that we're manufacturing now. And we are working with converting the farming plant in Hale in order to produce 4,000-liter bioreactors in order to continue to supply the product for its long-term demand and make sure everybody has continuous treatment. It hasn't been easy. You know, we're talking about an extremely high amount of enzyme, not only to make but to infuse. In fact, it's about 20 times more than what we're used to for some of our other products, but we're overcoming those. It's also time to celebrate, to appreciate the significance of the moment. A few months ago, actually less than a month ago, Genzyme won a very prestigious award called the Prix Gallienne in the UK. It's really the highest award that can be given for the most innovative drug of the year. It's the first time an orphan drug has ever been recognized for this achievement. And I quote from Sir Michael Rollins, "The clear clinical improvement shown in the patients affected by this devastating disease is a remarkable achievement." But we're not going to rest on our laurels. We celebrated one night, and then we just kind of said, all right, let's go. We got to keep going. And that's what we are right now. Sir Michael Rollins is an important person. He's the chairman of the National Institute of Clinical Excellence and head of our judging panel. And I believe Alan Muir might have been at that meeting. And if anybody wants to talk to him further about that, he'll certainly share that with us. You can be assured that Genzyme is in this for the real long run. Our mission is extremely simple. We're going to do what's necessary to support optimal diagnosis, treatment, and care for each and every patient. In terms of education, training, technological advances, measuring outcomes, continuing to increase knowledge and exchange of information. We're also here to build sustainable health care systems worldwide for the delivery and funding for ultra-orphan drugs such as Pompe. In the area of government policy, regulations, innovation approaches, clinical research, humanitarian charitable partnerships, economic evaluations of value, to convince countries that their citizens with rare diseases deserve fair and equal access to society's resources. So our mission sounds simple, but as you would imagine, it's quite complex. To make it all work, we need to recognize that we play an integral role. Genzyme makes available the products to physicians and services and education. In turn, we ask the physicians for data, information on safety, clinical trials. The physicians with those products provide medical care to the affected families, and there's an exchange of information and services between the physicians and Genzyme. Someone has to pay for it. Always one of the bigger issues. With ultra-orphan disease field, there's a high patient cost associated with it, and it's a battle, so advocacy becomes critical by everyone involved, including influencing the general public and including putting on political pressure and campaign in order to put the pressure on payers to do their responsibility to provide therapy. And finally, families need to support each other through this entire quagmire, which is a very difficult process in order to navigate through. So what do we need to do to continue to create a different world? A world when time to diagnosis is known at birth, that everybody is diagnosed at birth. A time when physicians know how to diagnose and treat the disease, all physicians. A time when consistent multidisciplinary care is given, when proper monitoring assessments are in place, when society doesn't question the equity of treating rare diseases, in a similar way where they don't question sending out a very expensive rescue mission to a few people lost at sea. So here's what we're focusing on to begin with. So we're doing everything possible to establish access to Genzyme worldwide. We're improving the accuracy and timely diagnosis, doing everything we can to increase awareness and education. We need to know much more about this disease as we heard earlier, and we need to learn more about Genzyme itself and its impact on this disease. Clearly, optimizing the delivery of care is what it's all about, and tomorrow you'll hear from our scientists on what we're working on to further improve upon this treatment. So regarding access, where are we right now? So we have 27 countries worldwide with regulatory approval. This includes in Europe, the Nordic countries, US, and Canada. Regulatory approval by itself, as you know, had its own set of challenges, and several of you played key leadership roles in your countries in order to convince the authorities directly with your compelling stories. I welcome you. Don't underestimate the power and the influence that you have and the control that you have to convince authorities to allow you to make the choice along with your doctor for therapy. At this point, we're busy answering questions from countries like Japan and planning and preparing preparations for about 20 other countries in Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Latin America. We have a long way to go. Now, reimbursement's a whole different story. Just because you have regulatory approval doesn't guarantee you get reimbursement. 22 countries right now are reimbursing our therapy. It's a little bit more challenging because there's no central reimbursement system, say, in Europe. So on a country-by-country basis, we have to fight for reimbursement. Not all countries who have regulatory approval have reimbursement. As a matter of fact, there are some countries without regulatory approval who are providing therapy on a compassionate basis. Many of you have stepped up to help this fight as well. We're going to continue to count on you, and the fight is not over. The issue is really central to our product label, which indicates treatment for all patients, but states there's limited data to support the safety and efficacy across the entire age population. So we need to change that. The fight will continue until we demonstrate the efficacy in our own ongoing clinical trials to ensure access for all. So when you look at all the programs together, that is, those patients on commercial therapy, those patients in clinical trials, those patients on a charitable program, there are 37 countries now where patients are being treated. And I'm very pleased to announce that we just this week crossed 500 patients worldwide being treated, which was our goal, was to hit 500 by the end of this year. So we're surpassing our goals thanks to your help. But we still have a long way to go. I wanted to give you some insights on how we look at the marketplace and what the unacceptable referral pathway is to diagnosis and treatment, because it takes way too long. On the average patient for an adult, I believe it's 7 to 9 years in order for them to present with symptoms to get treatment. In children, in infants, 4 to 5 months. By that time, it might be too late. So we have to afford change here. Our market research and our discussions with you all have told us that infants really come in for the pediatricians, neonatologists, and emergency medicine, and are seen initially and referred into cardiologists, pediatric nephrologists, and metabolic specialists. But ultimately, that group really has centralized care by the geneticists and metabolic specialists. And so this is one of our areas of immediate focus. For the adults, from primary care, typically is internal medicine, family practice, maybe rheumatology, comes into a neurologist for muscular symptoms, or pulmonologist for respiratory symptoms. Ultimately being referred typically to a neuromuscular specialist focused in this area. Important that these two groups connect, and that's one of our big jobs, is to connect these two groups. We are focusing on this, a number of physicians are involved, and you can imagine we're starting here and we're moving our way this way. This is what we call our primary audience, our secondary audiences, and our tertiary audiences. And our 5-year plan will be moving in this direction so that these people know all about Pompe right from the beginning. You could look at it a little bit different way and from a diagnostic and treatment process, that all individuals present with some signs and symptoms, and the doctor has to figure out and suspect certain diseases. They go through this rigorous referral process I just talked about, this circular process, where many of you have seen doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and I believe our data says it's about 7 before somebody suspects Pompe disease. This is unacceptable. The disease is finally confirmed, and then now that we have treatment, process of evaluation, decision whether or not treatment is appropriate, need for reimbursement, getting the product there available, and then infusing the patient and managing any type of issues associated with the infusions, and then in a continuous loop over and over moving forward. There are a lot of people to reach along this pathway. At the beginning, we have these gateway physicians and referring physicians we talked about. We have diagnosing physicians and diagnostic labs. We have treating physicians who are the experts you've heard from this morning, CSAs and PCLs and others. But the CSA is the individual who really helps across all the process, all the way across. But at each point, for instance, one of my primary jobs is to increase the diagnosis worldwide and work from a marketing standpoint. Our medical directors work on helping our scientists improving the diagnosis efforts. Our medical directors, medical information, and registry associations work with the physicians on evaluation and treatment. Many of you might have spoken to some of our GTS, or Genzyme Treatment Support case managers, which we'll hear from later about ensuring reimbursement. We call directly on the payers and the governments throughout the world. And then we have to provide the product and make sure that it's shipped appropriately. We have a separate group for that and follow-up. And then finally, we have patient care liaisons who deal a lot with some of the issues that are associated with the overall care and the patient advocacy groups to help with some of the issues you face, combined with make sure that the safety is reported appropriately. So what are the diagnostic initiatives we face? With this unacceptable care time to treatment that we have, we feel that people deserve to know the answer right away. They don't need to suffer like many of you have. And now that there's a treatment, we're finding that people are interested to listen in a rare disease. And so many of the initiatives we're focusing on is making sure that now that we've advanced the technology with the help of many of the people here today, that with a simple blood spot, we can diagnose this disease. And we have to increase the availability of that blood spot and promote them and make sure everybody is aware of them. To bring the networks of experts together and to determine what is the proper differential diagnosis. In discussions with you, the diagnosis have been from cystic fibrosis to Lou Gehrig's disease to multiple sclerosis. It goes on and on and on. There's one interesting limb-girdle muscle dystrophy is one that's come up a little bit more frequent than others, and what kind of a clinical classification, more or less, of an unknown etiology. And some of our recent work that we've seen at some of the laboratories and the surveys, that's a common misdiagnosis. So we're putting some programs together right now with the MDA here in the United States and many other neurology groups throughout the world on looking at the high-risk patients, so they may be being misdiagnosed with Gaucher disease for these number of years. Pompe disease for a number of years. And of course, we're working on newborn screening to change the policies, and Joan Coitz will be talking about that tomorrow. So what are we doing on the treatment initiatives, and what is our focus? It's really mostly on education. So we move from awareness on diagnosis to education in the treatment. And a lot of it is doing what the houses did on the early, and that is getting people together, building the networks, building the collaborations on understanding this diseases and connecting people throughout the world. We collaborate a lot with the IPA and all the affiliates throughout the world. Our publications are going to be critical to get the word out, and we're working on a number of different innovative marketing campaigns in order to reach all the physicians along the pathway who might come across a patient or suspect and need to know about treatment. Our biggest focus is continuing medical education with physicians in many of the medical societies. But we also have to find centers and get them interested, spark their interest, broaden their expertise, pull more people into this, and find and train infusion sites to make it more convenient and available to all of you. And clearly, most importantly, is hear it from the experts and make sure we're utilizing those experts appropriately. We all have a shared responsibility, and you've gotten us a long way together, but there's also some things that you can continue to do if you choose to. Tell your story. Tell it. It's the one most important thing that everybody remembers. If you ask a physician, if they see one of the videos that we saw today, this morning, if they hear the story, that's what they remember. They don't remember the statistics as much or what's happening if they don't know this disease well. It's critically important, and many of you are videotaping your experience. I think that that will be extremely important for all of you to talk to your physicians or even doing it on your own. The outreach that you have all worked on and done, and the education, the Pompe connections, the new DVD on living with Pompe disease, all critical to continue on with these efforts. We're thankful for you to participate in the clinical trials so that we can make this product available to you. There's other things to do when reimbursement is a challenge, and that is some political writing letters and campaigns, and even meeting with the payers and government agencies, which some of you have done in order to overcome the reimbursement challenges. So understanding the disease. We know a lot. We don't know a lot. I guess you could say either way. You know, when we're talking with physicians, many have the perception that Pompe is two different diseases, and we need to change that. They're calling it infantile onset and late onset, and they're thinking about it very differently. It compounds the issue when you have acid maltase deficiency, glycogen storage type 2, glycogenesis. All these things cause issues, and physicians think some are more urgent than others. They're getting confused, and we need to simplify it for them. So we're trying to have to use some consistent nomenclature and deliver some simple single messages. And a lot of it is just about the disease itself. We're referring to it as Pompe disease, as a singular disease. And we're referring to this as a spectrum of the disease. And it's more defined by the rate of progression to provide that spectrum. The onset of symptoms, when symptoms arise, and the extent and severity of organ involvement. And so we want everyone to be thinking about this as a broad way. It's just different points in time that maybe a physician sees somebody, but they're all on their own individual course that needs to be drastically changed. And we know a lot about Pompe disease, mostly from a lot of the work done by the IPA EMC survey, but there's a lot currently we don't know. We heard today of things that we're a little bit more clear on, that this is a progressive muscle disorder, that early diagnosis is critical. It's important to treat early. We know that ERT is effective in those studied, but not without risks. But ERT isn't the only answer. It's not the holy grail. It's not the complete picture. We have to work on diet to make the physical therapy, the respiratory care, the speech, the exercise component of rehabbing the muscles. This is all essential to the complete care of a patient. Genetic counseling is important. Should I have children? Should I get married? These are things we all need to be involved with helping you get this information. We know that what's important is we have to figure out what is everybody's rate of progressive disease so we can determine how to change that course. That the outcome likely depends upon at what stage of the disease intervention is applied. That expectations need to be set accordingly based upon that. And that we really have to understand the long-term follow-up and what kind of consequences that might bear. What is less clear? Certainly, who will respond? Will I respond? What are the predictors of response? How well will I respond? How long will it take to respond? These things will all bear out. And we find that many of the questions that we have can't be answered in a rare disease before it becomes available. It's the real-life experience afterwards that becomes critical. Is it ever too early to treat? Is it ever too late? What are the goals of therapy? Is it to prevent progression, reverse, halt the disease, slow it down? It may depend upon what stage individuals are in. How do we measure the disease activity? How do we quantify the staging of this disease? What stage am I in? What about the severity? Now that we have some guides on the disease, what about guides on treatment, when to treat? And what is this diagnostic algorithm that can rule in or rule out Pompe disease around all the different symptoms that mimic this disease? How best to measure the course of progression of response? All issues, including exercise, and how to rehab muscles and the atrophy that we learned a little bit about this morning, we need to really understand that to pull the complete picture. We're doing everything we can to learn more about the effects of Genzyme, and we're committed to continue on our study. Our post-marketing clinical development plan includes completing the expanded access program and transition all those patients who have not received reimbursement to date to our charitable access programs. Dr. Vanderploeg talked about the 5-patient mini-lots trial and the very encouraging results that we've seen there. That will be completed, and we need to work on publishing that. There's a lot at stake here for completing successfully this late onset trial, just making sure that we get to the end of the study and that the results are successful. There will not be another placebo-controlled study. There can't be. So we need to know that answer, and it's critically important for all of us. There are other studies going on the advanced stage of the disease. Can we see good reversal at that point? What are the goals? We want to follow up patients for up to 10 years, infants, to see really what is the long-term consequences. We have ideas in place and protocols in review now for immunosuppressive treatments for these CRIM-negative patients on how we deal with that situation. And clearly, there's still more to learn about the dose and to evaluate the dose. And we're starting off with a study of those who have very limited or less than optimal response on maybe a different dose regimen would be applicable. All of this is the clinical program. Probably even more important is what's Myozyme's impact on probably what's more important, and those that we hear from you about: functional health, activity, daily living, the quality of life, the types of assessments that have been done in the natural history, but that now we need to continue on, that treatment's available. We're embarking upon health economic evaluations to help justify the value and really establish the burden of illness to society of this condition, which will be critical. And our long-term efforts are really focused on the registry program overall. The goal of Genzyme registry programs are really simple. One goal: guide and assess therapeutic interventions. For the past 15 years, we initiated with the launch of our Gaucher product, the Gaucher registry, and now we have 4,500 patients throughout the world enrolled in this effort, which have made changes to our label, have made publications, and improved the overall care of individuals. We learned a little. We were ahead of the game this year, this time, and for the first time we launched the Pompe registry before therapy was available, up to 2 years before. We already have 264 patients enrolled from 18 countries. We have over 100 doctors enrolled, but we've only got about 60 active right now, so we need the data to come in. And the objectives are really straightforward: to better understand the variability, progression, and natural history, to provide the medical community with recommendations for monitoring and reports on patient outcomes to help optimize care, and evaluate and analyze the long-term effectiveness of ERT. We don't do this alone. We rely on the experts to direct this effort. Their oversight is important for looking at the goals, the monitoring recommendations, and really help developing these disease severity score systems so we can start relating what's happening across patients. And you've heard from 2 of the international board members this morning who help us direct this program. So how does it all work? It's an observational study, so there's no intervention. It's really just, it's really observing the routine practice that physicians provide care. Now, it's based upon recommendations, but what it is a physician will take the data that they have gathered based upon their assessments of patients, and they'll enter it into a database. And this is a web-based entry system. And then that data gets fed back to the physicians themselves, not only on that individual patient to chart out things like pulmonary function, muscle strength, and other things, but all of the data in a de-identified way. So these doctors here, by even maybe having one patient, has access to 264 database to maybe do analyses and understand and learn, like a virtual practice, if you will, of the entire worldwide community. And that's critical from an ongoing learning standpoint. The outcome can produce mostly by our experts, do more research and publications to learn, and the ultimate goal is the disease management and optimizing outcomes. This data is also provided, long-term data, and required by the FDA and the EMEA. And many of the government agencies who provide reimbursement have also asked us for the aggregate de-identified data to continue to show outcomes. So it's real simple what we do, and that is form networks, bringing people together, because it's these networks here that spread the word throughout, and it's those of sharing the information throughout the world and through here today that makes a difference. In summary, since we are in Texas, and since we're approaching Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving we all know about as a traditional Dallas Cowboy football game, we must remind ourselves that the game is not over, that it's a team approach, that we need to see that everybody gets in the game to play, that we're fighting against an aggressive opponent, that we've made some advances, we've scored some touchdowns, we've even, we've made some yardage, but the goal line is still far away. Yet clearly, we know we're going to be victorious. So thank you.
The next speaker is Kathleen Brewer, and she has worked in the field of case management for over 10 years. Before she came to Genzyme, she's from Genzyme company too, she has worked for a prominent insurance company in the Boston area, and now she is, for the past 3 years, here with Genzyme, and she covers the North Texas area. Are we in the north or the south here? I don't know, we are in the south. She got a bachelor in psychology, a bachelor in science of nursing, and a master in management from Lesley University. And the floor is yours.
Thank you for having us. We hope, myself and Sarah Dundon, who will be presenting after me, that we can shed some light on what Genzyme treatment support does. Over a decade ago, with the launch of Saradase, which was a precursor to Sarazyme, Henry Tamir, the CEO of Genzyme, recognized the need to assist patients to get access to treatment. Because of the rareness of the disease and the high cost of treatment, case managers were put in place. We started with 5 case managers working with 1 FDA-approved product. We now have approximately 35 case managers. We are still growing, and we're working with 4 FDA-approved products at this time. We specialize by region within the United States. Oops, sorry. And each case manager covers a state, or if it's a big enough state, as Texas, there are 2 of us covering Texas, and there are 3 to 4 in California. So those are probably the biggest areas. We monitor legislation, we monitor insurance, and we monitor any changes that come up with insurance products as much as we can for the states that we cover. Everything we do is confidential. We are HIPAA compliant as a result of federal legislation enacted on April 14th, 2003, which protects all patients' right to privacy. We will obtain a written consent from each patient, and this is good for 10 years or until the individual decides to revoke that consent form. The important thing to note for the Genzyme treatment support is we are free, confidential, and a voluntary program. If patients want to work with us, we're more than happy to help, but it's not an obligation that they do work with our team. One of the most important things that we do is we educate patients, physicians, and payer groups on disease awareness and treatment. This involves travel around the country to different conferences and trade shows to provide education. We also do presentations to educate medical professionals. We can sorry, not loud enough? Okay. We work with nurses, genetic counselors, doctors' offices, and any allied health professionals that want our assistance. We also try to help patients understand the benefits available to them through their insurance plans. Making me nervous. Sorry. You're making me nervous. So we help the patients understand their plans. Benefits are dictated by employer groups, and although several people in this room may have the same insurance company, you may have very different plans depending on employers, what carve-outs are, etc. And Sarah will get into a little more of that a little bit later. Another major role that we provide is coordination of care and patient advocacy. We assist the patient with tools, resources, and guidance they need in order to advocate for themselves and get what they need. Helping the patient and provider navigate through the vast sea of the healthcare, insurance, and reimbursement world is one of our major roles. Our job is to open the gates of communication between doctors, specialists, and most importantly, insurance companies. So how does it all begin? The initial contact with Genzyme treatment support must come from the patient. Once a call is made into our department, you will be filtered out to your case manager of your region. At that point, there'll be a conversation with you, and basically at that time we explain Genzyme treatment support, drug, disease, enzyme replacement therapy. We also will get some identifying information such as name, address, birth date, etc., and ask for insurance information if you do have it. Once that is done, we will send you a consent form. We FedEx it out, we give an envelope to FedEx it back. Once we get that, then we can start the process. By signing the form, it gives us the permission on your behalf to contact your doctors and your insurance company. Once that is done, we will verify your insurance benefits to the best of our ability. Now, I'm sure everybody has dealt with their insurance companies. Sometimes it's 2, 3, 4 calls, but we do try to get the most accurate information that we can so we can give you the most accurate information for you. And that sometimes means speaking to customer service, and also if you're in an area for a while, sometimes you can talk to a case manager directly and explain, what we're trying to do for the patient. That's probably one of the bulk pieces of our job. Next, we will inform the patient and the provider of what we have found out and what obstacles we're up against, or if everything we think is going to run smoothly. Then we will coordinate with our clinical sales associates, our PCLs, physicians' offices, and start getting treatment going if possible. And that includes working within a patient's insurance network if need be, working with how the drug is going to get to the site, where that site's going to be, whether it be a doctor's office, an inpatient hospital, home care, again, can be dictated by your insurance company. So we work with all those realms so we can get a patient on treatment. Oftentimes there are prior approvals needed for treatment, and we can facilitate that process by obtaining medical records, statements of medical necessity from your physician's office, and we can be the liaison between the physician's office and the insurance company, and we will actually follow that through and walk it through. Once that is done, if they still want recertification, sometimes it can be once a month, every 6 months, once a year, we will coordinate with the physician's office and get those recertifications done. And now that's the end of my piece. I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Sarah Dundon, who's going to continue on with the Genzyme treatment support services.
Again, my name is Sarah Dundon, and I joined Genzyme in November of 2000, and I work with patients in the southern part of Texas and Louisiana. And again, my primary role is to help patients get access to their therapy and help them with any insurance-related issues. So, as Kathleen has already mentioned, while we're doing all the things that Kathleen had mentioned, we're also referring patients to other resources. Some patients don't come close to reaching their deductible or their out-of-pocket expenses prior to starting therapy, and this can prevent them from even going on therapy. There is a nonprofit organization called Patient Services Incorporated, or PSI, that can assist the Pompe community with your premium costs, your co-pays, your co-insurance, your out-of-pocket expenses, and any incidental medical expenses that may not be covered by your insurance. Please keep in mind that PSI is separate from Genzyme, so if we do refer you to them, you do need to work with them directly. We will assist if there's a snag in the process or if there's a breakdown in communication. Oh, did I go the wrong way? Okay, sorry. We also communicate with insurance companies and physician's office if there's a claims issue. Our real focus here is to educate healthcare providers in order to avoid a payment issue. We want to help healthcare providers understand coverage, coding, and reimbursement for enzyme replacement therapy. But we are here to assist if there is a claims denial. We also coordinate the shipping of medication. We make sure that providers and accounts are set up to order drug. We make sure that the medication is ordered and it arrives in time for your first infusion. And we also have a pre-call program available where our ordering department will call these accounts ahead of time to remind them to order drug before your next infusion. We assist patients and physicians with appeals process if needed. It's very normal, or its denials are very common with newly FDA-approved products. And we can work with you to obtain written documentation from your insurer stating the reasons for your denial. And then we can assist with your physician with addressing the insurer's concerns. We also like to monitor the review to make sure that it is going through the appeals process in a timely manner. So I'd like to take a moment to talk about some things to consider when you do have health insurance. First and foremost, you want to find out where the cost of your medication and infusion charges are going to be covered and what your cost responsibility is going to be. Usually this is dictated by your insurer. And enzyme replacement therapy is usually covered under the major medical portion of your policy or under the pharmacy benefit. And if you're lucky to have it covered under both, then you really want to consider what is going to be more cost effective for you. Under the major medical portion of your policy, and depending on the type of plan you have, you may be subject to a deductible, a coinsurance, or a total out-of-pocket maximum, which is the dollar amount that you need to pay before your insurance is going to cover 100% of your health care costs. And then most HMO plans, you're typically going to see a copayment for your medical services. And under the pharmacy benefit, you're typically going to see a copayment for a 30-day supply of medication or a slightly higher copayment for a 90-day supply. Most insurance companies are going to have a lifetime maximum or an annual maximum on a policy. And you really need to be mindful of this, especially because of the cost of the medication and any medical services in general. You can reach your lifetime maximum or an annual maximum pretty quickly. So you definitely want to keep a close eye on that.
Anyway, I feel really blessed to be here. I've learned a lot today. My work at FDA is with advocacy organizations, but I've worked mostly with cancer advocates, and I'm real excited about getting to know your group and working more with you all. We do have a patient consultant program at FDA where we involve advocates from different life-threatening diseases, so I'm hoping to involve at least one of your advocates. I'll be talking to Maryland about that to see if we can come up with someone who wants to volunteer to learn about what we do at FDA, because I think it's really crucial for advocates to know about FDA. I've been working at FDA since 1979, so to me it sort of comes second nature to know when I read an article in the newspaper what it really means. And I wanted to share an article with you that I just found this week. We get clips from all the newspapers and trade organizations every day, so we get to see what the world is saying good and bad about us every day, and a lot of times, as you know, it isn't the most flattering. And this is an article that just came out from the Harvard Crimson, and Alexander Harris is the author. And I was just going to read you further down. He talks about drugs already get a lot of government scrutiny, too much in fact. A 2001 study by the Tufts Center for the Study of Drug Development showed that once drug development was initiated, it took an average of $8 million. Excuse me, we wish it was $8 million. It's $800 million in 10 to 15 years for drug companies to win the right to offer their product to American consumers. During those years, every American that could have benefited from that drug, either by having a higher quality of life or being alive at all, has not, while her cohort in less draconian countries have been living better and longer. Every time the FDA approves a new drug, like the drug that this gentleman is talking about, it's Symbicort, a new asthma medication, and touts the drug's benefit, it ignores that its delay in approving the drug has deprived Americans of the benefits of the time the drug spent in the pipeline. So I know you all have read articles like this about FDA, and I was just wondering how many of you really can sort out the truth from the fiction in the article about what FDA does and when they do it. And that's what I'm going to spend time talking about today, who does what and when. Yes. So this is the new drug development process, and it's online and it's interactive. If you click on any one of the arrows or the yellow dots, it'll take you back to some information about that particular part of the process. So what I was going to do was walk you through this timeline. I gave you another timeline that at the very top gives some estimates about the length of time each stage takes. So you can also look to that and take notes. So the other one that you all have looks like this. And I hope everyone was able to get a copy of it. So you may be asking questions when you read this kind of article. Is FDA dragging their feet, or are they approving drugs too fast? Is FDA being too cautious or not cautious enough? To be able to answer the preceding questions, I would propose to you as advocates of new drug therapies, you must first ask the following questions about drug research, development, and approval. The questions I propose are, who is doing what are they doing, and when are they doing it? The who is easy. It's FDA, drug developers, and you, the patient advocates. You are the who powers the drug development process along with FDA and drug developers. Knowing who, how do you figure out the when and the what? I am proposing that if you understand the drug research, development, and approval process, you are well on your way to answer the questions what and when. I believe it is especially important for you to be able to answer these questions if you are an advocate for new therapies in a rare disease like Pompe, because there are few advocacy dollars and advocates are limited. I ask you now to follow along with me as we travel on this timeline of who does what during the drug development process. As I mentioned earlier, on average it takes 13 years and $800 million from discovery of a molecule to the marketing of a new drug. Because of confidentiality and proprietary laws put into place by Congress to protect drug development, I will tell the story of the development of a fictional drug to walk you through the drug development timeline. The story will not be based on a specific drug or drug company, but on a composite of my experience at FDA. I'll call the drug Insight, with the hope that at the end of the talk I will have helped you have some insight into the drug development process. The fictional company is AZ Corporation. As the story begins, the year is 1984, and researchers at AZ Corporation have discovered a molecule that attaches itself to a specific site on a mouse cell. They believe that the molecule is worth continued study and preclinical testing. The timeline you are looking at begins with preclinical testing. AZ is a small biotech company focused on cancer research. AZ Corporation has developed and is marketing a very successful breast cancer drug, and resources from this drug gives AZ Corporation the financial base to continue to do drug research and development. The researchers successfully pitch their proposed study to management and call on FDA to get a consult on what preclinical studies are required. So that's the first time a company usually meets with FDA in the preclinical stage. The preclinical studies must show that the agent is biologically active. The studies must be complete or nearly complete before research can begin in humans. After AZ has a consult meeting with FDA in March of 1984, the company begins the required preclinical studies. After the studies are completed in July of 1984, approximately 5 months, AZ again contacts FDA to set up a meeting to discuss their preclinical data and assure themselves that they understand what should be submitted in an investigational new drug application, also called an IND. The IND consists of animal pharmacology and toxicology, manufacturing information, and clinical protocol and investigator information. A drug research company must file an IND with FDA before a phase 1 clinical trial can begin. So that's the first major blue line that comes down when the IND is submitted after the preclinical information is reviewed by FDA. So a company usually comes in and meets with FDA at this point in time. A drug research company must file an IND with FDA before a phase 1 clinical trial can begin in humans. In the meeting with FDA, it's September of 1984, AZ is proposing a phase 1 trial design for this drug Insight. AZ files their IND in October of 1984. As you can see from the timeline notation at the bottom of the slide, FDA has 30 days, and this is in your handout too, has 30 days to complete a safety review of AZ's IND. FDA will be checking to see if the proper preclinical studies have been done and that the phase 1 trial design is set up to be conducted in a safe manner for individuals who enter the trial. FDA must be assured that the individuals who enter the trial are not exposed to an unreasonable risk. In December of 1984, phase 1 trials or dose-finding trials are initiated. The company is looking for a safe dose and determining the metabolic and pharmacologic action of the drugs in humans. On the timeline, the phase 1 trial is the first arrow at the top of under clinical research and development, moving from right to left on your handout, and it's phase 1, the blue arrow at the top of the slide. It is now January 1986. As the phase 1 research on Insight is being completed, AZ Corporation is brought out by a large pharma corporation, XY Corporation. A corporate decision is made that XY's focus will be on AZ's marketed drug, and research on Insight is shelved. The 2 developers of Insight are hired by XY Corporation and placed on other research projects. As you advocate in drug development, you will begin to understand that dollars and time are not the only roadblocks to drug development. A change in corporate strategy, as depicted in this story of Insight's development, change in the law, new discoveries of other drugs, serendipity, all outside the timeline I'm describing, can slow or stop a drug's development. Now I'll ask you to fast forward to the year 1989, and we are at a research go-away for XY Corporation. The topic is targeted therapies. The scientists who develop Insight are still working at XY Corporation, and they begin an excited discussion about their earlier research on Insight, a possible targeted therapy in cancer. At the end of the 2-day marathon meeting, a substantial budget is set up to continue researching Insight. Moving quickly under the momentum of the go-away, our 2 researchers contact FDA in January of 1990 for a consult meeting on the phase 2 trial design of Insight. On the timeline, phase 2 is the second arrow proceeding from left to right. Given what the scientists are beginning to understand about the drug Insight, how it works, and on what cancer it might be most effective, the trial is designed for late-stage non-small cell lung cancer. With the advice from FDA in hand, some specific changes are made to the trial design, and the trial gets underway at 3 sites. After the phase 2 trials are completed, XY Corporation is back at FDA in 1993 with the preliminary data on effectiveness showing interesting results, and a phase 3 randomized trial is proposed with a trial to be conducted internationally. FDA suggests some changes to that design. The XY researchers go back and incorporate the FDA suggestions, but management at XY does not support the new trial design, even though the researchers now believe the FDA suggestions should be incorporated. Many strategy meetings are held, and in late 1993, agreement is reached within XY Corporation, and the phase 3 trial begins. Now it is December 1995. XY Corporation is back to FDA to meet in a pre-NDA meeting. At this meeting, the company presents the results of their trials and is checking with FDA to see if they have all they need to submit a new drug application or an NDA. FDA gives the go-ahead for the companies to submit their NDA. The company submits its application in February of 1996. From discovery in 1984 to filing a new drug application in February of 1996, approximately 12 years have elapsed. During this period, AZ and XY Corporation had the major control for how quickly the timeline proceeds. These are the preclinical and clinical research and development segments of the timeline. FDA acts as consultant up to the filing of the NDA, meeting with and advising industry about the safety issues and trial design. But as long as XY Corporation has designed a safe trial and the trial is reasonable, FDA cannot stop a trial if the company does not follow FDA's advice on trial design. Looking at the darker vertical line on your handout on the slide above, this begins the steps where FDA takes lead on our timeline. Please note the range in FDA NDA review. These are the times for FDA review prior to the 1990s, and the institution of legally binding 6-month and 10-month reviews were instituted in the mid to late 90s. So on your handout, it has a broad range of time. This speaks more clearly to how it was probably in the 80s and early 90s, but under mandate of law, now FDA has to process and review an application in 6 months or 10 months. In the continuing story of the drug Insight, the NDA for Insight is granted priority review by FDA. That means that by law, FDA must review the drug in 6 months. 6 months were established by law for life-threatening and severely debilitating diseases, especially where no satisfactory alternative exists, and regular review is 10 months. At FDA, a team of scientists reviews the NDA, a medical reviewer, statistical, pharmacology, toxicology, and chemistry reviewers. Before the 6 months is up, FDA must also visit the manufacturing site and assure good manufacturing practices are in place. Because the trial design for the phase 3 trials varied from FDA's recommendation, that is, some of the statistical analysis in the particular endpoint analysis and subgroup analysis were not pre-specified by XY before the studies began. Because of these issues, the NDA is brought to FDA's advisory committee of experts. Because this is a priority review, FDA must still meet the 6-month deadline in spite of the addition of planning for and holding an advisory committee. The meeting is held in June of 1996 after a day of deliberation with presentations by XY Corporation and FDA. The advisory committee votes to recommend approval. And in August of 1996, after working with XY to finalize the NDA, review and draft and finalize the labeling for Insight, FDA issues an approval letter to XY Corporation giving them permission to market Insight in advanced non-small lung cancer patients. Now, looking back over the timeline again from the first discovery of Insight in 1984 to 1996 when the NDA was filed, is approximately 12 years, and this is about the average for development and submission of a new drug application. In August of 1996, 6 months after the filing, FDA approves Insight to be marketed in the U.S. As you can see from the timeline along the bottom, this is on your handout. NDA submitted and NDA approved. There is a break in the middle indicating industry time, and there's a break here too, I think, where it says review decisions. During that time, FDA can stop the clock on a 6-month or a 10-month review if a major amendment to the NDA is necessary. Things like a major amount of missing data or a flawed trial that requires new data to be developed in another trial, or major manufacturing problems are issues that can stop the clock. But the norm, as you can see in Insight, for an NDA to be approvable or approved takes approximately 6 months or 10 months. I presented drug developers and FDA's role in the drug development process, but the story should not end here. The third group involved in this process should be informed patient advocates like yourselves. The knowledge about the drug research development and review process helps you and your organizations become more powerful, effective advocates in this complex process, and helps you place your resources where they will affect positive change. This timeline gives you the knowledge. In conclusion, I will leave you with a timeline to use as an advocacy tool, and I'll also leave you with the questions posed in my opening. What is FDA really doing? Are they dragging their feet, or are they approving drugs too fast? Is FDA being too cautious or not cautious enough? It is my belief that these questions are questions advocates should ask with every drug therapy that is being developed, while still keeping in mind who is doing what and when. Thank you.